Mark did not.
Yeah, I didn't hear.
Okay, well, we'll get started. Good evening, everyone.
Just now.
Welcome. This is our meeting number 8. We're happy to see everyone. Lots of fun time together. We'd love just to do some round of introductions, but before that, I'll turn it over to Marty.
Yeah, well, let's go around, I know we've done it before, but there's new people in the audience, so let's just go around and give our names, and then we'll get kicked off with the main goal of today. I think, did you say everybody did their homework assignment? No, everyone
I
gets a
think
star?
just about everyone did it, yeah.
Okay,
Yep.
and then, just for the audience, our homework assignment was to kind of describe what we saw as a follow-on to our plot plans, previous meeting, a little discourse on what we see for the various types of things we've been considering and the locations. So, hopefully, we've got 2 more meetings to boil all that down into something that we can hand to the village to give our visions and goals for the property. And I think that boiling down is going to be a fun process, but probably not too easy. So let's go around the table and start.
Steve Rouse, attorney, 35 years, 4-year member of village. Excited to be here. Good to be in.
Jeff Smith, 3-year resident.
Kurt Hansen, ecologist, environmental consultant, and a resident of the little island south of Roosevelt, Baltimore.
Tara O'Brien, local realtor and resident.
Jocelyn Sims, new resident, about 1.5 years.
Dave Goulias, resident at the Grove Residences for the past 5 years.
I'm Maria Maxam. I'm Commissioner of Public Health and Safety.
Roberto Escalante, management consulting firm, and I'm resident of Forest Park for plus 15 years.
Karen Swinger, business strategist, nonprofit administrator, and a 12-year resident.
Marty Twillian, retired engineer and totally 50-year resident of the village. Child and an adult.
Jessica Vogt, Commissioner of Public Property.
Scott Preslack, 4.5-year resident of the village and transportation planner.
Hi, and good evening. I'm Kindy Kruller. I work for Muse Community Design, which serves at time as the planner for Forest Park, and I've been working with this committee since I started at Muse in June. But previous to that, the founder of Muse Community Design has been working with the village to create the Altenheim Advisory Committee process, set up the charter if we wanted to look at that, and just try to help facilitate the conversation and the process. So I'm happy to be here with all of you. Okay, so as Marty mentioned, we are going to do a lot of reading and writing tonight, which is really exciting. I'm going to give you all your own copies in just a minute, but I just want to show. I'm sorry, I have to do it. I don't know why. It's a very nice screen, but I cannot, it makes everything just that tiny on my, okay. So what I'm passing out is a compilation of what everyone wrote. You will see everything grouped by the sections that were identified in the form, and at the very end are things that were left out. So none of your feedback or words should have been deleted, but rather it will be combined if we had duplicate ideas. Kurt, I'm sorry we missed you last time, but hopefully this makes sense.
Kitty, it might help just to, when I have a blank form here, and what the form had was, it had an RFP. It's an RFP, but we're not really doing an RFP. We're doing a vision and goals. We talked about an RFP outline, But the RFP overview, and what that question was, is what information should be included in the overview of the site development. The next category was parks and public space. What should be shared about the goals for active, passive, and park district, what parks role. We had talked, and many people, when we presented our plot plans, had talked about residential development. So it was what should be shared about the density and amount of residential development, and there was a few things that were summarized, I won't read them all. And then there was the commercial specialty development, because we had talked about a couple different ideas about data centers, you know, things that are really outside of what the current zoning restricted covenant is, but, you know, we were wanting to discuss what guidance should be identified about commercial and specialty development. And then last, the part of the form was that identifying the 4 major areas, which we've identified in that drawing as, I like to call it the northern triangle. The area immediately immediately west of the Altenheim residence. The center was number 2, the center portion is number 3, and then that small rectangular at the south was number 4. So in that we were to identify locally what we thought of those 4 areas. So that was the assignment.
That's right. Thank you. So what I talked with Marty about, just to build off of our last committee meeting where we had a lot of good discussion around what are the different options. We did not get to completing the worksheet, so you got to complete that as part of the form. But just to start, have this document take shape and develop some consensus. And I just, you know, we understand that, you know, as a mayoral appointee of this committee, that all of you bring different backgrounds, different skill sets, knowledge sets, and just, we're hopeful that this community and citizen approach is, you know, will give the mayor and the rest of the commissioners a good opportunity on where to think about what this final RFP should reflect and create some kind of site program for future development. Okay. So in that spirit, just to walk you through the this document, and then we'll dive in if that's okay with everyone. The first 2 paragraphs are just to set some background. The site background is just our information about the site, just to kind of give some history. The second paragraph is about this advisory committee, and again, that you are all appointed by the mayor and serving as a residential voice to create a vision for the Altenheim property that the village bought in 2001. We then start to get into specifics of what the committee members identified in the form. So again, I worked to create, hopefully, under this general site information for RFP. This is a working draft. I just want to put that out there for the attorneys and others in the room. There's different voices in terms of, like, some are like, you know, first person, some are, you know. So all of that needs work. And so what we're really trying to dig in here is the content and really thinking about the development process and where in a future developer and what flexibility and what you're flexible on and what you're not flexible on. And the other thing that I just want to point out that Marty, a couple meetings ago, he walked through the zoning approach for the village of Forest Park. And most likely, again, no one can see the future, this would be developed through a PUD or planned unit development process. The PUD process would, you know, set a lot of that stage in terms of requirements by the developers, and there's a big onus on creating market data, circulation analysis. But I would say the other one that's probably most important is that public information and public meetings. I did not put PUD into this document because no one identified it, but it's something that we might want to consider as we're thinking about it. In particular, because there was a couple direct references to Mark's Denny's plan that people identified in their as a member of the Altenheim board, both R2 and R3. So with that being said, I just wanted to point that out, that the PUD is not, it's an omission because no one identified it, but it might be something that either we want to talk about how we blend in today, or identify it under this zoning section. So just revenue, there's been a lot of discussion around revenue. We know that there is a desire to create some kind of revenue generation. Neighbors, we've heard a lot about the desires of the different neighbors related to the site. And there was some specific community input around sustainability, stormwater, and using the site as a, active park and gathering spot. Then the next three sections are the residential development, park and public space, and commercial and specialty development. Again, if there was folks that were saying the same thing, I just tried to do my best to bring everything together into a more succinct, single point. And then where I'd like to make sure we spend some time after we go through these sections is the development uses for each site. I did not combine these because I just wanted folks to see the different ideas and the number of ideas for each one of these parts of the site. And then the last section are all the things that I left out. And so there was a lot of questions, there was a lot of other ideas, but because if the village's goal and the committee and the commissioner and the mayor's goal is to have this to be developed by a private developer, we will most likely follow the market as the development is either financially feasible and market ready.
But I think,
Go ahead.
I know we talked about our recommendations, and I think this is right, that the section I'm left out will remain in the recommendations. Is that not correct?
That's really up to the committee, so.
I would hope that it's hard, you get 11 people, you're never gonna get an absolute consensus, but I would hope that we can have a general consensus on what our recommendations are for the various parts of the property and for the various types of things that we're gonna recommend, whether it be parks, residential, some mixed use, specialty business, specialty commercial or industrial, but that this last section, I would hope that we could leave it in, just to kind of, it's almost like in the Supreme Court when they do, you get the dissenting opinion. I don't want to leave out things that have brought up, maybe didn't have a consensus on, but that were, something that we saw as, this might be something that we want to say that it's not in our recommendation, but it's part of our discussion, so that that way we don't have to. People feel, especially if they feel strongly about something that they proposed that it's not making it into our recommendations, we can put it into that section. But as with all of this, this is just what we've thrown together, and we're here to kind of, if we want to say no, we don't need a left out section or dissenting opinion, we leave it out, and it just those are things that were part of our discussions, but didn't make it into the recommendation. So, any thoughts on this section being a part of our recommendations?
I would just say that I, got all of this morning and did my best to kind of create something that was to be presentable and readable by the committee. So I'm happy to go through the entire left out and the entire document.
Well, I think we should go through the document, and even though we had our assignment, if there's anything that you forgot or want to add that we put down here that we're still want to consider for our final document, by all means. But that's we can add it, because really this is just compilation of what people said in their responses.
Marty? Yeah, I just have comments. Let's say, okay, so we have this RFP. Is it possible to, I mean, I don't know, if it, you know, how you all feel about this, but, can we say, you know, like, a developer's interested, you know, has the RFP, but we have in the documentation, maybe a requirement that, that the developer engages in a charrette with the CTA and, or something like that, where, you know, the potential for, you know, collaboration or some other solutions that would affect the CTA would be involved. I mean,
Yeah,
having a
I
shred-
don't think anything that we are, you know, we're not putting down requirements, we're
Yeah.
putting down recommendations, so yeah.
recommendations.
Certainly,
Okay, right, I see.
certainly,
Okay, yeah,
You know.
as a recommendation.
yes.
Yeah, okay.
And, you know, like we had always talked about, this is for goals and visions, so that if we have a goal for, you know, that someone's participation or, you know, then yeah, definitely we want to.
Or maybe describe some kind of a charrette that would involve CTA.
I'm sorry, say it again?
Yeah, a recommendation that, you know, that the developer engages in a preliminary design charrette with the CTA, with the Altenheim, and, you know, some other stakeholders that.
Oh, yeah, well, and I think that's certainly, that, you know, that, if you look back through, or look through the PUD, our code.
Okay.
Many of those, it's either
That's already-
bulleted, or it's A through,
Yeah.
like,
Yeah,
R or T, it's codified, they have to do, they have to engage the public, they have to do transportation studies, they have to, you know, so that definitely, and I know, Steve's not here, but I know Steve has said in the past.
He's
that this
coming
would-
back, he's gonna go check something.
oh,
Pardon me?
He's coming back, he's just
Okay,
checking something.
and he can say it again, but I know I'm pretty, you know, he's said that this would be developed through a PUD.
That was the question I asked him. So you guys, it's my recollection, from prior testimony, that it's zoned R3. And if we do an R2 development, they could probably build it as a right, we need to go through the PUD. So,
What- Well, it's zoned R3, but the restricted covenant is R2.
Two under the restricted covenants.
Yes,
so anything they did too, they wouldn't need a PUD, possibly, depending on setbacks and everything else. So I just don't want everyone to assume there'd be a PUD, depends on the developer, especially if there's open space, where the developer does it, so he doesn't have to get community input.
Or she.
He would lose money, not saying, or she, excuse me. I apologize. I just want that out there.
okay. You know, would that, we want to add in here how that regardless of whether it is done under a PUD or not, we want it to be done as a PUD and impose all those requirements that go into a PUD on this development, even though it's an R2.
Well, if it's down zone to R2, I just don't think any developer is gonna voluntarily do R2. They're gonna wanna shove more density in there.
Yeah.
So I really don't believe,
Without an ask.
without, yeah. But so I think it's gonna be a PUD, but I think
I'm sorry, say it again?
I think it would be a PUD, but it wouldn't hurt to put something in there to
Yeah.
mandate it, or at least, even if they're not going to, they can go through that process. So that, but I just wanted it called out so everyone understands. Still versus the restricted color.
Yeah. You want to try to, I think your team type pretty fast, you know, I think,
I'm gonna type, yeah.
okay, as we
Yeah.
work through this and try to capture the.
I'm gonna do my best.
Okay, good, great.
If I don't catch it, I'm gonna write it in my notebook.
And I'm sure you'll remember that it's not PDU and a
Oh,
PUD.
PUDs, yeah. Thank you.
No problem.
I can't type fast, I'm not always the most.
Yes, that's
I
okay,
try-
as long
I
as
try.
you, it's like shorthand, as long as you can figure it out later.
Can someone just, because I'm not just breezily conversant in these different modes of zoning, R3 is,
R3 is, just, do you want to summarize?
High density residential.
that's what
High
I
density
thought.
residential, 60 feet high, it has certain area requirements per each unit. Setbacks.
All right.
R2 is maximum 35 feet, 2.5 stories. I don't know if you want the commissioners
Not
want
trying to
to.
recite the code. It's medium density residential.
Medium density.
Sort of the short form.
And then R1 is just single family home on an individual lot.
Okay. What Mark drew, that.
Yeah,
Did that represent the R2 covenant, the R2 zoning?
It did, the only part that was, he showed R2 for the bulk majority of it around the Altenheim and
Yeah.
the center portion.
Yeah.
He did have a little, I think he had, it was, the key was it was red. There was a little area that he had highlighted as red as R3 at the southern tip.
Right, okay.
But I think he said that, yeah, that it was, he meant to meet the R2 zoning. And I think his target was young families and seniors, you know, that he identified a floor plan that, you know, 2-bedroom, 2-bath. But yes, he, in the bulk of his area that he showed for residential development was R2 with the southern tip.
Right.
I think 43 total units is what he said.
Is that what he had, 42 total units?
I don't know if that includes the R3 or not.
Probably not.
Probably not. Did you say probably not?
Probably not. I mean, R3 probably 43 units by itself.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which would be where the money is, right?
Anything else we want to add on this zoning bullet? Okay. The revenue comments that I received, and the second sentence is duplicative of the zoning. But because there's potential for increased revenue with zoning, I left it in. The development of the Altenheim should be revenue-driven with suggestions on how to fund it for partial and park, open and park space. Do we want to say anything else about revenue?
Should we talk about pros and cons of the village donating their property to either drive open space or drive more density? Probably more open space if they're interested.
Sure.
Because we have to give the developer a hearing for less development.
I would just say, let's talk about that, we do have this park section coming up. I know it's hard to strip revenue out of the land use and the site program, but
You know, when we say to fund partial, to fund a partial for open
Yeah.
park space, are we talking about, you know, because it does, unfortunately, it does seem like, at least in the immediate future, that the village is gonna be responsible for this park area. The park district has said that not at this time. So I don't know if that's a matter of saying, okay, we wanna be able to fund the village to maintain that, or?
Well, that, yeah, I put that piece in.
You did,
Is there
yeah.
a way we can develop enough revenue so that we can then use some of that revenue to develop that open space or park space, but also provide annual maintenance for it? Because right now, there's no money.
Is Altenheim maintained right now?
no village.
Villages?
Oh,
Just mowing the lawn.
I
Yeah,
think that's
yeah.
good.
But yeah.
That clarifies it, to develop it and maintain it,
Right.
so that, you know, we wanna build a, whatever.
Find the money for that.
So it's like,
Yeah.
it's self-sustaining what the open space is that?
Yeah, I mean, because right now, there's no money. The park district doesn't have any money, and the village has it.
But currently, it's being maintained at the same my concept at least was just to leave it as is, pretty much. Open grass, open space, and maybe some enhancements, but nothing that would cause a ongoing maintenance responsibility of what's going on now.
Yeah. But, you know,
Until they take over active management.
Yes, yes.
In 5 years, whatever.
Yes. But, you know, we have talked about, there are people throwing out ideas for an active park space too, so that if we end up making that recommendation, then hopefully we can provide the village with some funding so that they can manage that, because they're gonna be the ones to do it initially.
Okay. I think it's fine for now. I think that's a good idea and it's self-sustaining, but I think,
Maybe just, you know, maybe just make a note saying that the fund for both the development, or, you know, or maybe this, can we get into when parks, we talk about active and passive, but to fund a development of active space, if that's.
Or would there be any value in just kind of clearly enunciating, or narrating here that, you know, as a whole, this project should be at least revenue neutral, ideally revenue positive for the village, just to make sure we don't end up with something that's actively costing us money? Because that seems like the exact opposite of what we're trying to do.
Yes, so you want any idea how much it costs to currently take care of the north parcel?
No, but I could get the number.
And I don't think it's probably a very high bar to make it revenue neutral. If all you're talking about is grass cutting and general maintenance, picking up trash. A lot of that trash is generated by parties that were used to be thrown on the property, which probably anymore.
Is the rib-fested revenue generator for the town, the village, or? I mean, is it?
In some years it has been, I don't know about recently.
Yeah. But it seems feasible to we just left it as a green space. That sounds like a neutral solution, revenue neutral solution for what we're talking about here. Yeah.
Steve, is it fair to say that, like, Groovin' in the Grove and Rib Fest, they're neutral in terms of the cost, that they don't really cost the village?
Well, a study of those groups, I think, is irrelevant in the context of Mark Zinni saying that, you know, fully developed, we want these public events, which are in violation of the restricted covenants, to just ADOs.
Yes.
But just as, for an example, you know, if we were to put some active park there, you know, I don't know if that would violate the restricted covenants.
It would require,
but in fact,
it would require further, any active transportation, active recreation would require further negotiation between the village council and the Altenheim.
And I do think that the restricted covenants limiting the area to develop, as it was explained to us in the past, that anything that, any shovel goes in the ground, that's development. So the restricted covenants, I think, require that 3 acres remain untouched, so.
anything else on revenue? Neighbors, the development should clean up the property lines with Altenheim Senior Living and address the health, safety, and quietude of Altenheim residents and neighboring Grove residences.
I would like to add that the Altenheim should take over active management of the cemetery. Clean that up, yes.
Never hearing.
Yes.
She's reading.
Yeah, I know.
People can't hear you there, yeah, I'm sorry.
If you could just raise your voices a little
Okay.
bit so the public can hear you, that'd be
Okay.
nice.
Yes, of course. The Altenheim should take over active management of the Altenheim Cemetery.
I.e. clean it and fix it up. And keep it clean and fix it up, because the whole rest of the site is not gonna be.
about neighbors. Community input. So this is where I took things, such as, things about like LEED and green, development, community events that we've heard, might be incorporated, but might be in violation of the, quiet enjoyment. The development should consider the following: also address mitigating the environmental and climate change effects of construction through the guidance of the green building rating systems such as LEED. Community events like Rig Fest, future potential events like Farmers Market, Music Fest should take advantage of open space that also flexes with the surrounding space. Anything else around community input? Parking and traffic. Identify circulation, new driveway access, relationship to CTA, and provide a plan to ensure traffic doesn't become a major issue for the area.
That's a hornet's nest.
Yeah, but
Yeah,
the PUD process will
What-
make all of that become evaluated.
gotcha.
They'll do
Oh,
traffic
really?
studies,
Oh.
they'll do circulation studies, I mean, a whole traffic study will have to happen.
And who does, I'm sorry, I just,
I'm sorry, go ahead.
It's
Say that.
okay.
so if we, I guess, are we encouraging the migration to a PUD development? Is that the goal?
Well,
Yes,
yeah,
but-
but I don't think that has to, that's not necessarily limits. You know, we can identify other recommendations. You know, we talked about it, and I think, and Steve addressed it, the idea that working with the state to allow, you know, and I know, Steve, you made some measurements there, that there is room to have access from Van Buren onto, directly to Des Plaines. We can, you know, obviously, I think, I certainly feel like that's something the village has talked about for a long time, and, you know, that we don't probably need to make that recommendation, because they were pursuing that anyway, but it's not bad to put it in our document if we feel like, you know, we wanna highlight that. So I know that's been talked about a lot. But, you know, it's not in the village's control, but it's still, you know, and, you know, I would imagine that the people that are from that area, when they say traffic has become a major issue, they would say it already is a major issue, we just don't wanna make it worse. And, you know, try to make it better, but, so
To
I
ensure
don't know how to
traffic
capture
doesn't-
that.
Okay. So do we wanna, would we prefer to say to ensure traffic congestion doesn't increase?
Yeah, or even alleviate the current traffic.
It's not realistic.
What's that?
Can't say that.
That it won't, because it will increase no matter what we do.
Well, I don't know, if you get an exit out
Yeah,
onto
that's
Van
true. Yeah,
Buren,
and an alternate exit.
or, you know,
Deal with the railroad.
Scott talked about getting a grade crossing from Jackson.
I mean, the problem with the right out of Van Buren too is, related from a traffic perspective, is my word would be cut through traffic, because there's a lot of people who already take Jackson around. And if you have a right out on, or from Van Buren to Des Plaines, that may have more cut through traffic that way as well. So I think as far as the section goes, we probably should just keep it, or make sure that, you know, maybe a better way to phrase it is, provide a plan to ensure, traffic, or traffic in the area remains locally oriented, so that, you know, they're avoid cut through traffic, and that, you know, there's not a major traffic generator on the site that will increase congestion or residents.
Right.
Or increase
That was-
access to mitigate.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Say that again.
Yeah.
It's good. Did you get that, Katie?
But as a result of this development, access is increased by Scott's plan over the railroad tracks and by the right turnout. I think that assists, mitigates
Yeah.
any increased
Right.
demand by the developer.
Yeah.
I think that's something we should advocate for, not only for the future resident, but for the current resident.
Yeah, traffic will increase no matter what happens here, it's just a matter of, are we able to handle
that opens up, that was, I think was your thoughts about maybe developing parking lot.
Yeah, and that's a possibility with this too, but I mean, the larger point is if we do nothing, traffic's probably also gonna increase. So, yeah.
But, you know, however we want to phrase that, you know, that I thought those were good ideas and good thoughts.
Okay. So this section on residential development has 2 bullet points. Again, I took what a few of you said and I incorporated other similar points if it was nuanced. Otherwise, it went into the end of the section, the last section. I'm not gonna read all this, because you have the printouts and it's up here, so.
Can you, when we say current neighboring use, we're referring to like the R2, the developments, or?
And I think the other
Because
developments.
there's R3.
Or R3, yes.
There is R3 at.
Yes.
At Grove, R2 and R3.
Yes, yes.
So you're meaning the R2.
That last, the last sentence,
Of the first or second bullet?
the second bullet,
Yep.
might there not be maybe an acknowledgement, maybe if we give Altenheim that buffer that they want, that they
Yeah.
give us more development in return, more density and a farther spot in that farther south spot. Some kind of trade-off, give us some room to negotiate. More open space, whatever we decide is gonna be most important.
So, I wouldn't offer it right away. Mark's not here, so we can.
Yeah.
Hopefully he won't see this, hopefully he won't see this videotape.
Yeah.
Because we don't want to give them anything.
No, but if you get more than you give, it's a good deal, right?
Yes.
So,
But that would,
I think the only way we would do it is if, because the cost, the value of that land, that strip, it's right next to their building, it's not developable, we can't really sell it to anybody else. So, turn
But-
the tape off, but, you know, the idea is you get something for nothing,
Yeah.
basically.
yeah.
Beyond that little strip though, if they really do hold us to the agreement and there's none of the public activities are allowed on that northern piece of property, they're basically just getting a front yard and that's easy for them to access and the people that live nearby, and that's kind of it. So they're already getting, in my opinion, personally, quite a bit out of this deal that they don't have to pay for,
Yes.
but that they have the best access and use of.
But remember, they're entitled to what, 3.8?
Yeah, correct.
So-
Agreed,
Yes,
yeah.
that's true.
So
We're not
Yeah, that's
giving them,
true.
we're just honoring the agreement, we're not
That's
really
true.
giving them anything.
That's true.
What we're giving them is that buffer space that they desperately want, they're not
Yes.
saying it that they desperately want it, but you know they desperately want it.
Also, I think what they want a lot is just the certainty. I mean, this has been a cloud over everyone's head for 2 decades more or less. So just knowing that there's an actual plan in place,
Right.
that in and of itself has value for the ultimate.
You don't know your boundaries, and combine that with the path being set pretty much, then they'll really know, where they are, on the space.
With us having MVE and WVE in there, do you wanna put DVE in there too?
Sure.
Disadvantage?
You know, and in fact.
So DB is the umbrella term that includes.
Yeah, all of them, and it adds veterans.
EVs for transportation contracts.
What's for construction contracts?
MWB.
Does that still get veteran-owned businesses and stuff like
No,
that?
you could also add veteran.
I thought DVE was kind of the umbrella.
EVs only for transportation contracts. Federal funded transportation contracts.
But in transportation, DB is made up of MDs and WBs.
But we can add, there's a veteran certification, so we can add a veteran piece.
Kitty, did you catch that?
Yeah, sure.
Yep.
Okay. And as far as the buffer, I've made the comment, but I may be the only one thinking that, it is, if you were to look at the Altenheim now, and if they, or someone were to come to the village with the plans for the Altenheim now, saying we want a senior development, of this capacity or whatever, you know, we would not, I don't think, you know, at least by the writing of R3, although I know there's special things with the PUD, but we would not allow that plot to be overbuilt like that. So this is an opportunity to, you know, to say, well, yeah, but it's a good point that they already have in the agreement that 3 acres are not developed, but this is an opportunity for us to say, okay, we're not developing it, but here is, you know, you also need to maintain this portion of the property, whether it's a gift or bought, whatever, that you now have property that's consistent with the development of your size for a senior residence.
I think Altenheim's always gonna want some more property anyway. Mark's mentioned in the past, they're parking constricted. So even if they need more space for parking lots, that would be property that they would need to buy back from the village.
Yes, yes.
We give it to them more density, which we might have more money on.
Sales is sales.
Anything else about residential development that we want included in this section? Okay. Park and public space. So I, again, pulled a couple different points that I thought were relevant to this section. And then if anything was duplicated, it went to the end. I'll just read through the 4 bullets pretty quickly. I'm not gonna read them in full, but the first is that request that the developer maximizes open space. The second is that open space should be included as part of the overall plan for the site. The third is the northern triangle of the Altenheim is optimal for open park space that can create, that can be both active and passive. And that the 4th point is the role of the Park District of Forest Park is very important to future plans.
You don't know what the last sentence means in the last one.
A developer may be willing to accept some of the maintenance responsibility.
In perpetuity, or temporarily till the park district comes in, or for what?
I'm not sure, again, I just wanted to leave it in here for,
Other development must be flexible to allow our district to come in and undertake active management of the north parcel at some point in the future.
Yeah, that's better.
Or we can also
Research
clarify
and
that.
software, you know.
We also might be able to clarify that, you know, the Park District may be able to assist, they may not.
Yeah.
That's an unknown.
Yeah, make it conditional, right, if the park district, the developer should be flexible in allowing active management of the north parcel.
I just have a last question about that. If we were to leave that northern portion as an open space, as it is, do we need to segregate that from Altenheim, like with a fence, build out with some kind
Yeah,
of?
well, I think we've talked about the fact that we would take the fence down along Van Buren and then
Yeah, right.
actually, yeah, delineate whatever property is added to the Altenheim, delineate that so that it's clearly then becomes a Altenheim versus what that corner park would be. So, yeah, I think that would be, you know,
And that would be something the Altenheim would be responsible, in other words.
probably not. I
Is there
don't
something
know.
in the code or zoning that would, once, well, I think I got it.
No, but I think it's a good question, like, to separate out the, right, you know, what, you know, Altenheim has to have their own. And Steve, does Altenheim, they don't own those parking spaces, do they?
They do.
They do, Okay,
Oh.
so that would, yeah, it would seem then you delineate, okay, this is the Altenheim and this is public. And make that very clear, what is now part of that park and what's the Altenheim.
I'm gonna grab the flag for you.
Going back to the north parcel, shouldn't we, at least provide for some flexibility for that parcel to satisfy the stormwater management needs by retaining pond or something?
This-
For the area to the south, and so the north area, since that's very passive use, and it would, it would solve two problems. It would take the stormwater management out of the south, put it in the north,
Right.
and be a nice reflecting pond, whatever you're coming in to build.
So if you look at the second bullet, last sentence, it is anticipated that the open space will also contribute to the site's stormwater management needs. Wherever possible, open space to be used for stormwater management should be available for passive recreation uses as well. Does that sound?
Yes, I just was trying to get it off the south and onto the north.
Oh, okay.
So why would we even have the park district play a role? If they're gonna buy it, if they're gonna use it for their detention, why don't we say, congratulations, you're now maintaining this for perpetuity?
They're not buying it, they're getting it. It's part of what they're getting as part of the restrictive covenant, the 3.8. So they're not buying the north parcel, they're getting the north parcel.
Mean the park?
No, but whoever the developer is.
Oh, no.
I think the park district would become active as an active recreation use, like it was a soccer field or something. But if it's just passive, I don't know why the park district would take an interest.
Or if we put a pond on it,
Right.
it needs stormwater management.
No,
Yeah.
they've said that they're not interested,
Right.
you know.
That's why.
And not at this time, you know.
No, they said the only thing they're really interested right now is indoor facilities anyway.
Yeah, so I think we're, you know, the village
Yeah,
is
there
gonna
has
be
to
the one that has to take care of
set
whatever
aside
we
for open
designate.
space.
And I get that, one more thing about if you're gonna actually put in a basin or whatever, you're usually buying that land and for you to build your basin, so why would we get whoever's gonna build this stuff to the south to actually buy that land and put their basin?
And the HOA would maintain it?
And have,
Yeah, and then make them have to pay, I'm doing what I'm saying, like, why would we wanna keep it, have us have to deal with it one way or another as a village? If we can be like, okay, this is where you're gonna put your basin, you're buying that land too, it has to stay open because that's what the covenant says, and now you're paying for it.
And the only catch with that is that it's no longer public land,
yeah.
That's true,
which means if they put a trail around it, it's public no longer officially has access to
it's
it.
valid.
So that would be the trade-off.
I think that was the idea, was to keep it public open, private, not private.
Right.
Can the, and I don't know if it's done, but can you have a requirement on a development to say that you have to maintain this, you know, this park and it be public and not just for the homeowners?
I mean, the village
And
may,
have the developer pay for it, and
Yes.
the HOA pay for it.
Well, have the developer build it, the HOA has to provide the funding to maintain it.
the only thing I can think is that the village may be able to do like a land lease, where we retain ownership of the property to the north, but lease it to the HOA.
For 100 years.
Yeah, for 100 years, for $1 or whatever, but so it's still officially public space,
You know,
and
like,
they're
like,
in charge of maintaining.
like the pocket parks were done, the park district paid nothing for that, but they have a 100-year lease and for $1 and they have to take care of it.
I just don't know why we would wanna own someone else's detention basin, unless it's actually ours and we get to decide what happens to it and, but if
Well,
we're literally owning someone else's.
Well, if it's on the south, we're not gonna own it, the HOA's gonna own it.
Agreed.
The only reason I was trying to get it on the north was to.
Maximize, put down money for.
And serve two purposes, have active, or passive space, it's easy to maintain, detention pond, nothing's easier, just a bunch of water.
Well-
And make it pretty, you know, and
Yeah.
maximize the exposure to Madison. I mean,
Yeah.
You know,
tucking it back in some place where you can't see it doesn't seem to make sense from a aesthetic standpoint.
and you know, if it's, you have a pond there, you have a little trail, walking trail, or, you know, just make it aesthetic, make it an inviting place.
We just, if it's their stormwater storage, then we would never just get to fill it up. You know, get what I'm saying? If all of a sudden we decided, oh, we actually do wanna turn this into an XYZ, whatever at this point,
You would have to solve the stormwater management
probably.
somewhere else. And I don't know that all of that space would need to be stormwater management, so you probably would get that as the other parcel, I don't know, we could have to be.
Just plain devil's advocate.
Sure.
And we have a triangle across the road. that you could easily put a basin there instead, because no matter what you're doing, if you're taking stormwater from the south, unless you wrap it around the side of the building, it's not gonna be super easy to get it there, unless we actually let them tear up the street, which is probably what they'll do. So who cares if they go to the east or the west?
Yeah. Or underneath the road. If we do an access road, they put it underneath the road.
You know, as we're talking about it,
And as an access road at the top there, it connects back to the front. So that's anyway, it's not a road, it's an emergency access road. That's where the stormwater tank. If they do.
where along the, not along the drive, if you turn.
Remember on Mark's plan, at the top out to the west of the Altenheim?
Oh, yes.
You had an access road running from parcel 2 to the north parcel.
Yes.
So I'm just saying, if you're gonna connect, that's how you probably connect.
But that was accessed through Van Buren, not using the,
No, it was access from parcel, the north end of parcel 2 to the south end of parcel 1.
Like that little 10 or 12-foot strip that that the village has,
West of their
just northwest of the parking lot.
And he has that there for a reason. That's important.
So are we okay with this language as it currently? I mean, anything else about parks or public space?
Do we want to, I know we have some language in here about prairie paths, do we want to mention the new path that's coming in? Just to clarify that that's already an existing project that will be built by the time whatever this starts up.
Yeah.
I think so. And this project should be built in harmony with that plan.
Yeah, that path needs to be maintained.
With respect to that, yeah.
yeah, complement it or enhance it, whatever.
That's what, because we're getting to that part where it's not gonna complement this commercial specialty development. It's on Van Buren, the path is going there, how do you have cars coming in and out? Right. And you brought that to our attention last week.
Yeah, because I start getting the curb cuts and.
Is Harmony agreement, Scott? Great. Great. Okay, so this is where I did take some liberties, and I'm hoping we can have a discussion. The commercial and specialty development, if we're gonna look at this with a very strict lens of it being R3, down zone to an R2 through the restricted covenant, the only as of right, would be residential, parks, schools, cemeteries, and churches. And so, I feel if we wanted to create a list of, so I had some issues in how to really think about what do we want to present to developers that are market, that's gonna be market driven. How specific we could be about either commercial or specialty development.
I had a conversation with Pete Armstrong after one meeting where he was suggesting sort of like a white collar office, a low density office space on the first floor. You know, lawyers that have to go to Maywood's, something like that, or, you know, architect, engineers, so something that's low density, low demand, as opposed to a coffee shop or something else like that. Given its location and people wanting to work from home, that might be something. It would not anger the all time because it doesn't drive a lot of traffic and a lot of noise and a lot of issues.
To that aspect too, I remember, I forgot to mention in the previous meeting, but doing a little bit more like intergenerational uses, like a daycare facility, that I think would also be acceptable in this. That might be a conditional use in R3.
It's conditional and.
Conditional anywhere?
And daycare is, it's actually interesting, we've got a number of people petitioning for special uses for daycare, but it's usually the embedded neighborhood churches, where it's become a vestigial issue. Crow Van is doing a multi-acre development in Jackson, Harlem. It's through entitlement, the old Moore concrete site. As part of that development is gonna be a huge chain daycare center as well.
Full disclosure, that's a client.
Say it again?
I said full disclosure, that's a client of mine. Wanted to go on.
So when you say like businesses will be market driven, can you just explain a little bit what that, how do you, what does that look like? And like, yeah, how granular do we get in terms of offering units for businesses or commercial that would go in there? Who makes that decision?
I mean, I think it would be a part of the development package through the PUD, that then those uses would be specifically identified for their approval.
After reading it,
Like,
the Altenheim,
yeah,
Altenheim's I have to check off on it first.
Right.
I almost feel like the word by Altenheim should be in the first sentence.
Okay. So, I mean, so we have a couple ways that those uses will have to be reviewed, approved, vetted, which is why, again, I was hesitant to put them, all of the ideas in this list, because I'm sure there's a calculation on current, market availability, the type of, whether it's an office space, or whether it's a daycare, or whether it's a church, or whether it could be any, what those different uses would be, that would be a part of the PUD process. But previous, yes, it would have to be reviewed by the
So
Altenheim.
the first bullet at the end, right development is presented after approval by the Altenheim.
Okay. Does that answer your question? Yeah, okay.
And, I looked at the market driven is if the developer thinks it's feasible, if thinks it's economically viable, to put some kind of, light retail in that area.
The problem always is who manages it. You almost have to sell it separately as a condo from the HOA, because the HOA is not gonna want to run it, and the developer's not gonna want to run it. So you have to get a condo association for just those commercial developments, or you have to sell those lots outright to like a Dunkin' Donuts. So if you're gonna go with an office development, like a 3/1 kind of thing, where you have commercial on the bottom and then residential above, you have to break out that commercial into condos or a separate association.
But is that how it's, well, I know the old, Circle in Madison, there's the Kirby Coffee and a few other things. Those, I believe, are condominiums, that they own that part, the bottom
Yes.
portion of that building, and it's just like a condominium like the rest of it.
I'm just saying you have to provide for an ownership separate from the HOA, however you want to do it. There's a lot of different ways to do it. You can package it and sell it, you can buy it, you can manage it, just like strip mall.
Right.
Or you can do it individual units and sell each individual commercial condo. You just have to provide for that, because the developer's not gonna want any part of it. That's why they
No,
don't like
no, I wouldn't think so.
development in
Right.
a residential.
Right. Gets complicated.
It gets complicated, they don't want it complicated,
Right.
they want in and
Right.
out.
They wanna be able to-
Be done, on to the next one.
Yeah.
So can I ask a question? I mean,
I'm sorry, go ahead.
not to take a few steps back, but something that had come up in the last conversation that I'll admit, I don't know if I'm fully clear on, I don't know if everyone else feels like they're clear on it, but similarly, when you talk about sort of feasibility and market demand, right, that they would look at that and do studies and think through, what is the market demand for that, what is the feasibility when it comes to retail and that sort of thing. With the housing that we're talking about, we talk about, what is the current market trends, what are the current market trends, what, do we have housing sitting empty? Is there an influx of people, like, are we gonna get in a situation where there's houses being put up that then sits empty, right? Is that something that, you know, because I think that was mentioned last time, and the answer was, well, developers will look at that. So are you saying then that they're gonna do research and everything, and if they actually find that, hey, you're, you know, you probably don't wanna do this much housing based on current market rents and everything else, do they then come back and share that, and you have to come up with a different idea of what will go there, or how does that process work?
Will you answer that, please, Steve?
Yeah, they won't be negotiating with us, they'll be negotiating with the village and staff as to what, you know, we only make recommendations and then it goes out to the world. What comes back doesn't come back to us, so we have no further input. But that's how the process works. You know, the village gives them something, the developer gives back something, there's community input, it all sort of works into a pot. And the end result is something that's not everyone probably likes, but everyone can live with. So, to answer your question, yes, the developer does a ton of market research, that's how they make their money. Because they want to put stuff out into the market that sells. And they're not really thinking about the market today or tomorrow, but 5 years in the future, 10 years in the future. They're trying to pitch it, catch a curve, so that when they come to the market, the demand's there, and it sort of meets at a high point, not at all.
Yeah, if the developer doesn't think they can make money on it, they won't build it.
Or respond to your.
Right, they won't even respond to the RFP. We can put the RFP out, and if nothing comes back, then we know that, sorry, we're either too dense or not dense enough, or whatever the problem.
And as you know, I've been saying that a couple of times, I just don't want us to do all this work and then put something out there and it just lands like a dead fish on the market or on the developer community. And I understand we're not selling our souls, but we just have to, I think, as much as possible, understand it's a market-driven process that we're appealing to and trying to develop.
Well, and is there any way we can balance, like, you know, maybe some other social needs perspective on that? In other words, you know, the market shall govern all decision-making as far as what type of housing, what type of.
You won't demand it, because there's gonna be a trade-off. I mean, it's not like the village doesn't have a voice. They come back and say R3 everywhere, you know, 12-story high.
Yeah.
That's a non-starter too. I mean, they have to be realistic. I'm just saying there's two ends of the spectrum, right? Well, complete open space, a non-starter, and way overdevelopment, a non-starter. The whole thing, the devil is in the details of where it's gonna fit,
Right, yeah.
and that continuum between the two.
And so how do we, in other words, so
We don't.
what do we?
Just do what we're doing, and let them come back with something, and then the village will negotiate it. We can't control all outcomes, we can't over-specify, we have to keep it general, we've gotta give them room to move.
But we can't we, you know, have some commentary, have some comment as far as, you know, housing affordability, or, you know, I don't know, you know, or do we just leave that entirely to, is that out of our wheelhouse here? And that's
Does the
just.
village have an affordability requirement?
What's that, Steve?
There's nothing statutory.
Okay.
But you've also mentioned in the past that
I'm just
punching
curious.
above our
I'm-
weight class in terms of affordable housing.
Yeah, we're way over.
But just by virtue of the fact that this is a mid-market town, we have affordability. It's defined by HUD as no more than 30% of your, is it median income?
Yes.
You know, we've got plenty of affordable rental housing.
And I
Okay.
think that's one of the, just to kind of, you know, also circle back,
Yeah.
Jeff has given some really great perspective too, on that there is a lot of affordability, well, I'm gonna paraphrase. There is a lot of affordability in Forest Park through different housing types. What doesn't exist is like a Class A, and I don't know if that's the right one, but like a more modern, updated rental apartment community. And that's for, there's these terms now, like pre-suburban and post-suburban, so younger professionals or empty nesters. And so there's not, in my understanding, so, sorry, I'm not trying to talk for you, but I appreciate that perspective.
Yeah, just, I mean, from affordability perspective, I think, like, the city of Chicago has like an ordinance that requires in certain circumstances affordable housing to be developed, given like zoning changes or stuff, but that's because they can, because in downtown Chicago, there's certain demand for that type of development, you can pay a premium for that Forest Park. Probably doesn't have that same kind of market dynamics, so I don't know that you could require affordability in the same way. You could like give away discounted property maybe or something like that as an incentive to create some affordable units, if that's a priority, I guess. But I think, to Kitty's point, I think the Forest Park has like a good mix of housing in terms of lower density, older, naturally occurring, affordable housing, but it lacks some more modern, redeveloped other housing that would make it, sort of more diverse housing stock that would appeal to kind of that kind of arc of like, what's the future look like, where's demand going to be in 5 to 10 years? I don't know if that exists right now in Forest Park, so I think that's where this development could fit that need.
Well, I think we kind of fall under the TOD.
I'm sorry, say it again.
Kind of fall under the TOD that we threw out there as well. Usually that's kind of targeted to a little bit more affordable, because they're smaller spaces, you don't need vehicles. So I think that's always.
TOD can be a kind of development, it's just transit oriented, just less space, but you could be TOD for senior citizens and be upscale. It could be TOD for young couples and be upscale. There's plenty of that in the city too, near the health stops.
The city has like incentives, like there's a specific policy, if you develop within a certain distance of transit, you get like development incentives. There's
Less
also
parking,
trade-offs.
less parking.
Forest Park doesn't have a specific incentive for transit-oriented development, so you could build single-family homes near transit, or you could build, you don't get an incentive for that type of development, because there doesn't exist, I guess, or in any sort of.
We could put that in the PUD process, and that's something the village can negotiate in the PUD process. Like, you want to put TOD here, we'll give you less parking requirement for that southern parcel, let's say that's the TOD spot. You could say you could build the TOD here, but you don't have to do the set aside for however many parking spaces, 25, 50, whatever. We'll let you do it for 7 or 8 or 9 or 10, because it's a TOD. And boom, then they just made a ton of money. I mean, that now, they'll give you your affordable, they'll build a little higher, because they won't have to fill those parking spaces. Which would mean in that situation, a parking garage, 4 stories of development or 2 stories, and then development above it. Maybe they knock it down to 1, that saves them a lot of money. But if you're gonna throw your $1 million in of land, you have to make sure it's a priority the village wants, right? Affordable housing, open space, whatever it is, because you only have a limited amount of money. You can't use it on something that it doesn't maximize your value.
To that point, I would also strongly recommend that we do look at specifically calling out a lower parking requirements, if any, just because that will be a good way to get more open space.
So that's kind of a foregone conclusion. Any multifamily residential development will start with the most awkward dance, and that's between the village and the developer, who will say, I need this to make money, you can't have this. I need, the metric for parking is 2 spots per dwelling unit. None of the developments we've done in the last probably 15 years have had 2 spots. And they do throw out that, access to the highway, access, it is an awkward dance. It really sort of wastes a lot of time, but I'm sure you represent a lot of developers, Steve. That's probably pretty light on your feet.
So, flexibility in the document, I think, is important to give the village an opportunity to negotiate, and the developer an opportunity to innovate.
This is a question as much as anything. Isn't there an interplay between the affordability and density, or, the density? Because, I know we've, in my experience with the village, that, they want smaller units, they want less parking, they want denser, building footprint or more units with smaller square foot, but then that impacts the neighborhood, you know. We end up with more traffic, more
Well-
problems in the for the surrounding areas,
Grove's
so.
not gonna want smaller, low-value units next to them, that's gonna drop the property values. You're gonna want a higher class development.
Well, yeah, not only from that standpoint, but just from the, it will impose more traffic and congestion to an area that's already very challenged. So I don't know how you balance that interplay.
That's all the more reason to throttle back on parking. I mean, if you can't park your car there, you're not gonna drive. So you don't contribute to congestion.
Yeah, I don't know.
Developers are gonna have a hard time selling a upscale development, like the Mark design,
Right.
with one car garage.
With one car, yeah,
That's not gonna happen.
yeah.
It's gonna be two-car garage. So you're gonna
That's
go that
that.
route, but again, that's only 1 or 2 stories, so that's your trade-off. So you are, you know, if you're talking higher though with no parking, I think that's where you get your benefit, down that south spot, and that gets some density in there that's not really impactful if you limit parking.
And circling back to, you know, this point's becoming kind of like a refrain here, but if the market can't bear it, it won't get built. So if a developer doesn't think a zero parking facility or zero parking requirement would be survivable, they're not gonna build it. However, they may think that, okay, maybe we only need a spot and a half per unit instead of 2 spots per unit, and then let them, but that comes out in the PUD.
Or they work out a deal with the CTA for that big lot.
Right.
And you sell that park and say, hey, let's give our guys a, you know, a year pass.
This kind of
for-
monthly pass or whatever.
Yeah, monthly pass or yearly pass for whatever, $500.
Yeah, I can see
I'm
that,
saying
but
flexibility.
you know, the developers are not worried what happens 10 years down the road. They're worried about what they can sell and make money on, and then where the residents are left with you know, configuration that congests the area. You know, we saw that with when the people with the Roost development guys, you know, they wanted to jam as many units. They talked about lift stations to have 2 cars or whatever to meet the requirement, but, you know, they wanna build and get away. And we have to watch that we're not left with something that,
Absolutely.
you know.
That's the whole PUD process is, it's gonna start.
Okay. Anything else about commercial and specialty development before we get into the specific site areas?
Oh, yeah.
Should there be a mention of the prairie pad impacting that?
Oh, yeah.
In the commercial and specialty development?
Doesn't that have to be in harmony with the prairie pad if there's curb cuts and traffic
yeah.
cutting over the prairie pad? I just think those are compatible uses.
Like sort of access ways, setbacks and things like that to make it
Well,
safe.
let's say you do put a 4/1 there and you have commercial, Dunkin' Donuts, coffee shop, whatever, curb cut, curb cut, parking, you know, spots maybe, backing up into the prairie path, everybody, prairie path.
Or at the very least, if you're building right up to the sidewalk, if you have a 10-foot wide trail, you don't want to open your door onto someone who's biking about 50 miles an hour.
There's a name for that in the biking community.
Doring. Yeah.
Doring, there you go. I just don't know how that works. Unless you turn it inside, and that's the back of it, and then you would think you get the back facing Van Buren, and that's the back there too.
So, I'm not gonna go through and read all of these, because again, this is exactly what, everyone submitted. And I'm just gonna breeze through the map so we can look at all of the things together. But it really, there was, majority of the committee identified, open space, flex space. There was a identification of commercial use. Any thoughts on, and we don't have to be prescriptive, gravity in specific places on the site. So I don't know if this is too much, but feels helpful, I guess, through, just thinking through. The other thing that no one identified, and if they did, I'm sorry I missed it, just the village retaining some of the, some aspect of the site for long-term, the village retaining some aspect of the site. So I don't know, again, if we want to include that, or if that's a part of the negotiation.
Negotiation.
Not to sidestep it, but we could say that, this would be public use and not worry about who owns it.
I don't know, that's kind of a, personally, I think it should be, in the absence of the park district, maintained as ownership by the village.
The village want to be free of all of this and have the HOA manage it. I'm almost positive the village doesn't want anything to do with it after it sells it to the developer. Why would they? Unless they want to continue managing the north side and just cut the grass. But if you can pass it off to an HOA, why do you want to do that too? They don't know with the right to come back in 5 years or 10 years and pick it up as active management. Does the village want to retain ownership of an open piece of property, pay taxes on it? Open land? I don't think so. Especially if it serves the stormwater management needs of the development. That was the idea behind it, part of it at least. I don't want to speak for the village.
No, you're 100% right. I mean, that big, sort of ill-defined parcel just west of the westernmost Altenheim building is, in all likelihood, going to have to contribute to MWRD compliance, so, there's awkward access and egress, but if you look for context across the street at the 77, 71, the more contemporary townhomes, that tail that goes from the northernmost part of the built environment, wrapping around to Madison Street, 90% of it is owned by the HOA, and they needed it for MWRD compliance.
You say 90% is owned by the homeowners association?
Correct.
And the village loves that.
The village loves that,
It's open space and they don't have to pay for it.
but it's not public though.
I walk my dog on it, no one says anything. I mean, I'm not
Well,
being
maybe so.
smart aleck, but.
No, that's true.
I mean, I do. So I think that's the perfect result. All the benefit of the road.
I mean, I do want to interject one thing. I mean, they brought the land initially, it's the last sort of empty space in Forest Park, and I think they didn't want to see all of it developed, so I am curious about that trade-off of developing all of it, and then the last bit of public space becomes a retention pond that people can't really use.
I don't think all of it would have to be, but yeah, I mean, let's say half of the northern is water, the other half is open. You don't have to pay for it. It's not fenced. You can walk on it. But you don't have to pay for it.
And that strip of land we were just talking about east of between Van Buren and the tracks, that's stormwater officially space, but there's no pond there, it's just flat grass.
It's all underground.
Yeah.
Percentage of development that's accepting
Right.
stormwater.
It's permeable, yes.
Which could be all we need. The one in River Forest has a pond and doesn't Grove have a pond? Retention, no. The one in River Forest has to have a pond, I think, because they have so little permeable space. So I just don't, that's beyond our expertise. How would it be satisfied? But underground or above ground, either way, the portion's gonna have to be open to accepting water.
It's part of the deal with Altenheim, you say, you have to mow all the grass to the north.
it's,
Well, that's the thing, that area you talked about, for that development, I think it was out of their own generosity that the car wash maintained that spot. Otherwise it grows over with scrub trees and it's an eyesore, like the south end of the Altenheim property, so it can't be let to fallow, there has to be some ownership and responsibility to maintain it.
I think in the default, it should be the HOA. They're going back to, and if that changes, then discussions.
the village now spends, it's maybe like $600 a week to mow all
If they
of it.
want half,
So-
the HOA pays half, or, it can all be discussed, I don't think we should get.
Maintains that spot now?
We maintain the property, but it's probably about $600 a week, to go over there and mow.
Okay.
It's not like.
Yeah, because you own it, right?
So that's doable.
And you pay taxes on it, right? The village pays taxes on all, no?
We just have a few more minutes. And I think this is fine just for discussion. But this other challenging section between the Altenheim Senior Community and the lot line to the west, there was a variety of plans and ideas that ranged from open space, residential, green space, commercial use, multi-use. And then between section 3, between existing buildings and Altenheim Cemetery, this identified primarily residential.
And giving part of that land back to Alden, right?
Some,
Yeah.
yeah, the fourth bullet says, except a strip of land immediately adjacent.
The Zinni plan, he's got just that top little.
Yeah. Yeah. And then this last section, there is this TOD, which Roberto commented on earlier, potential for commercial specialty at the public space. So I would say sections 2, 3, and 4 have a more mixed recommendations. Section 1 was primarily open space. Do we have any members of the public that'd like to provide comment today? Yes, sir.
My only comment is about this entire committee and its process and publication and whatnot. I used to pay a lot of attention to what happened in the village, and then I dropped off for a few years, and I was kind of surprised of how this whole commission has met over the last half a year, that there's just really nothing out there about it. I had mentioned earlier to some of the members that it's disappointing it starts at 5:30, where that does drive away a certain amount of potential public, people in the public to show up. There doesn't seem to be any advertising in any way for these meetings. They're on the calendar on the website, but something as simple as the mayor's end of the week email blast could have included that this meeting was gonna be here tonight. I didn't see anything there, and I don't really see anything in the paper other than, a calendar that talks about, these meetings being out there. I'm going to post these meetings, and whether anybody watches them or not, I think they need to be out there. I was also surprised there was no mechanism to record what was happening here. So, I don't know, this harkens back to 20 years ago when everything was intentionally under the radar. I think maybe this time around, it's unintentionally under the radar. And I just think we gotta step up the profile. Now, I realize this is the 8th meeting, and I'm coming from way behind, but at least going forward, if we can, now that we're into a process now that is going to be essentially publicized, if they do go out for proposals, I think at this point, we need to know what the committee is doing, what the request for proposals is ultimately gonna look like, and I don't know what kind of leverage it's gonna take, but this stuff has to be out in the open somehow. And, maybe there's a little pocket for it on the village website somewhere. It's just wrong.
I have a comment also, and it's really kind of more for the people in the audience. Steve and I, as he said, we've been watching some of this for years.
I'm sorry, Gloria, can you do a little louder?
Yeah, Steve and I were involved in many of these things over the years, but stepped away. And when they do the PUDs, it is open for the people to come and speak. Because that's a big, important piece, because we saw many of them come in, and we went to all the meetings, not only us, many others, and it's a really important time for your voice to be heard. And, I'm assuming a lot of you live in the Grove or around the Grove. You're gonna be living here. We don't live in this vicinity, but, you wanna have a voice, and your voice is really, really, really important. So that's all I wanted to say.
Can I make one more comment too? It was alluded to a little bit here about the future, making a proposal for how this property will be maximized 5-10 years down the road. There was a proposal for a project on Harrison Street where they just took down all the buildings that the Park District owned. And they wanted to put in a senior living facility there. And they really, really insisted on trying to get away with, I don't even think it was a half a parking space per unit.
And small units.
And the units were small, and it's like, it was a horrible concept, and it failed, rightfully. But we can't bank on the senior citizen, what's the word? We don't have an unlimited number of baby boom senior citizens anymore. At some point, this is gonna eventually wind down. So these properties will have to have some sort of future use for 25 years down the road, not just 5 or 10, and not 100% from the developer's perspective. That particular project, they tried to push through with like 18 parking spaces for 50 units. So the talk earlier about, maybe having to negotiate, and what Mr. Glinke said about, they haven't put a proposal together that required the 2 spaces per unit, which is what's in the code. But there has to be some really long-term thing. Marty, you said you've been here 50 years, I've been here 37. Some of us hang around a long time. And it has to be a useful city beyond just what's happening now, or 10 years from now.
I'm Gene Armstrong. I have 2 points that I would like to make. First, I would urge the village to figure out some way so that a proceeding like this could be amplified with individual mics or some process whereby what everybody says can be heard by everybody. Those of us sitting back here hear about 1/3 of the discussion, and I can't believe that sitting here you can hear clearly what's being said up there. So technologically, that would be a real plus, and the screen is, from the perspective of those in the audience, completely useless. The second point I'd like to make is, I don't know, and maybe you don't know yet, what if anything, will the public input, will it in some respect be included in the report that you submit? There were public input from several presenters, and I would urge that the committee decide how that public input might be dealt with in the final report that you make.
I have a question. At one point, you were going to be doing focus groups, and there was going to be a big meeting at the Ruse, potentially. Did everyone decide that they weren't going to be doing that? Do you recall that there was going to be focus groups, and there was also going to be something at the Ruse? And
Yeah, I saw that in the paper.
following that wine walk was another time you were going to get some input or communicate with the village. And then there was mention of focus groups. Are you still planning to do that? Focus groups and the Ruse, a big Ruse meeting?
At this point, my understanding is that the recommendation from this committee will go to the commissioners and the mayor, and there will be additional public input once there's something to respond to.
Well, perhaps you could put her recommendation in your report that you send, and there's a call for public meetings or focus groups, like you said. So,
So we don't have the exact date that this will be, I mean, I'm gonna look to Marty on this, when it will be submitted.
Well, I'd like,
and
you know,
thank you, go ahead.
I think ideally, and I know it'll be difficult to try to incorporate everyone's comments, maybe boil this down a little bit, submit it to the committee in a certainly not final form, but it's another draft, have us review it prior to the next meeting, and it's still open for the recommendations, if we want to recommend that council hold a public meeting after the recommendations are made public, you know, that could be part of our recommendation, but anyway, that we you know, all go through this over the next week, get comments back to Kindy, we try to, or maybe we condense it first, incorporate these, submit it to everyone on the website, we'll take a look at it, and provide comments, and then meet for the last time on, it's now March 6th, is that right? And then walk away with that, with a completed document that we all feel comfortable that we can hand to the village, and maybe, then that would conclude our work.
I would also like to just share that there is a website, it's linked from the village's homepage, where it says Altenheim. It's altenheimfp.com. All of the agendas, meeting summaries, everyone that's presented or provided public comment are included in those meeting summaries. All of the plans that the individual committee members drew up and annotated are also in the meeting summary. So my recommendation as well would be that will live on as long as the village wants, you know, through this process. And we should encourage the developer, that could be, you know, that's where also all of the other official documents are being, you know, public documents are held. There's a history and a timeline, there's summaries of other previous development processes for the Altenheim. So if there's anything else that, you know, the committee would like on that website, and thinking about that as an overall, you know, or if we should print everything off of the website and that gets presented to the council. But I just want to remind everyone that we are capturing all of this, we are taking notes, we are sharing this information, and it's all publicly available, and it's linked from the homepage.
Does the village track the hits that they get?
I've never been asked to do analytics on it. I am happy to do analytics on it.
Because I think what I'm hearing is maybe part of the problem is the lack of publication of our website. And people just don't know what's there, and I just think analytics will tell us if that statement is true or false.
And I think part of that too is the understanding what our committee is. Our committee is, we're all residents with different backgrounds. And we're here to try to give a vision to the village on what the eventual use of this property will be. And that's just a recommendation where it will have the interplay between the developer and the village will take place from this point on, but this is just a group of residents that, you know, I think unlike a lot of residents, and actually even with my prior knowledge and involvement on the Altenheim, I learned many things about it. It's not, you know, there are a lot of, whether it's the restricted covenants, the zoning, there's a lot of issues, a lot of things that someone has to know or be aware of. As we've gone through, we've toured it, we've looked at all the different things so that, you know, it's through that knowledge base that we've developed and our backgrounds that we will come up with what we think are recommendations for the future use of the property. And from that point on, the whole process of development is, you know, is still in front of the village.
I do think, I want to add one thing. Sort of liaison to the council, I'll speak for that portion of it. You know, this committee was put together to do the work that you've been doing and also include community outreach and engagement. And it seems like before your final recommendations, visions, go to the council, I think that there should be a level of community engagement so that you can get feedback from the community, so you can adjust things before
Yeah.
they go to the
That
council.
sounds like a good idea.
Well, you know, we have had.
I mean, that's part of
Yeah,
what they tasked this committee with,
Well,
engagement and
we
outreach.
we did a random survey, and I think in some ways a random survey is better than, you know,
But it was
just
50.
targeted. It's 50 people,
Well,
it's a
not
random survey.
statistically significant.
And we've also, well, I'm not, I wouldn't say that, but I'm a statistician, I can't really say. But I think that we did a survey, and we talked to major stakeholders. We reviewed the comprehensive plan that was updated in 2014. You know, we've looked at other input to gauge the community involvement. That this document will generate more. So I like the idea of getting something on paper, completing the work of this committee, and it may be that people want to see additional community involvement. They want to see a continuation or another committee that then picks it up, refines it. That may well be, but.
But your recommendations should be informed.
I think they are sufficient for the vision and goals, the high level vision and goals. You know, we're not writing an RFP. I think we have the.
It's up to the committee. As a council member, and I'm saying my recommendation, the intentions were to formulate these visions and goals, present that to the community, get their feedback, make your final document and present it to the council. If you don't want to do that, but I would like you to talk about that and decide that.
We're an advisory role, isn't that what the PUD process is for? I mean, that's really where this whole thing gets public comment and vetted out. We're just making recommendations to get a plan that's gonna be subject to community involvement. From an advisory standpoint, I think we've gotten the public comment we needed to advise, but the actual ultimate product is what needs to run through the public process, starting with the board, then the plan commission, and then through the PUD process. And there's a ton of chances going forward for people to comment on a specific plan. Now we're just doing recommendations that are not really specific. When someone has a plan and an idea and they see it and it's posted, that's when they can really understand how it impacts them and what their impact should be on that plan.
And a lot of people behind us have been at almost every meeting. We've had times where we've had 20 people talk in one meeting. We've had various people from the village and other, like when Ralph came and did his talk about everything that their group had done previously. And I'm just kind of backing what you were saying, Marty, where it's a group of people where this is all in different parts of our background. Some of you guys live right near the property. And at this point, eventually you gotta throw the spaghetti at the wall and then see what's gonna stick. And I thought that was really why we were brought together, was to get to a point where, hey, we've been talking about this for decades. Like, here's kind of the summary of what we all found out from going into the weeds on this for more meetings than we were even supposed to in the first place. And now it's like, okay, this is what we came up with as members of the public that were asked to be a part of this and volunteered to be a part of this. And if we, I don't know, if we don't actually make something as a group, I feel like all of our time that we've all volunteered kind of doesn't have any use, and then we'll go right back to getting this is based off of so many different people's opinions that have come and talked to us. I mean, even Gene's presentation that he did was, I'm sure, distilling a lot of people's different opinions in the first place. So, I don't know. I agree with what you're saying.
Yeah, and I'm not
These guys
talking about like the microphone and the listening session. We have lots of that.
Yeah.
I'm talking about, you've got your almost distilled final presentation. That should be presented to the community, maybe not at 5:30 on a weekday, and just say, this is what we're gonna present to the council, and you all can provide your feedback. And that's just distilled, see if it lines up, and that goes to the council. To me, that seems like a positive step to try to make sure that everyone's had an opportunity to provide their feedback.
I think it's a positive step, but I think that's outside really the scope of the committee. Right now, you've got a group of varied background that's on this with various levels of experience in different areas. We've gone through the 6-month process, and now it's the 7th month. I think it's time for us to use what we've learned and get something on paper, and how the village then wants to engage the public further. And I wouldn't say that we haven't done it. We have engaged the public. We've looked at documentations. We had the survey. We talked to stakeholders. I'm not disagreeing that our recommendations that we make don't deserve some kind of public input. But I think we have enough and have done enough and understand the property well enough that it's time for us to put some recommendations out there, and then how the village wants to take those and refine them or get public input on them, and maybe form a new committee or start the process. I think it's time for us to put a bow on it, hand it on, and then what the village wants to do with it, and how you want to proceed from there. That's the council's decision.
I agree with Marty. I think our job for the committee is to create, we've been doing, as a lot of people have already been mentioning, we've taken a lot of input from a lot of various sources throughout the village. We ourselves are members of the public. I mean, all of us live in the village. We were tasked with making our recommendations and giving that to the board. Whether the board decides to take that and do another round of public outreach after that, terrific. But that's really going to be up to the board and the mayor. I think from the committee standpoint is, let's land the plane. Finish up our recommendations, hand it to the board, and what the board does with it from there is not our problem, because our role as the committee would be done by that point.
Knowing that there's a PUD process, because if this lands and we don't get any responses, all that's been for waste. All this has been for waste. So until the time for public comment is when it matters. It matters in the PUD process. It doesn't matter so much in the advisory process. All of this time, we have to see what we're going to get back first. We may not get anything back. We may get something wildly inappropriate back. But to worry too much right now and get too much public comment about something that may never come to fruition just seems like a waste of the committee's time and of the public's time.
I'm also going to make the assumption that we're not going to finish this report in the middle of March, go to the next village board meeting, and insist on pushing this straight out to an RFP. I assume the board is going to take some time to review our comments, do rounds of outreach, and do rounds of input on their own time. There's probably going to be several weeks of deliberations, and then before it finally goes to a final decision. I do not think that the commission, our group finishing or creating a work product is the end of the line for this process in any way, shape, or form.
We don't even have that power.
Exactly.
We're
Yeah, so like,
It's the board of elected officials that should get the public outreach. It's not the advisory committee whose job is to give you the raw product to get the outreach. That's all we're really here to do, I think. And base that on public comment that we've got, and everyone's talked about it ad nauseam. I don't think we need it. So, and the fact that we're already over a month over what we committed to, which I have no problem with, but other people, I'm sure, have a lot of other things to do. I just think we have to, like Scott said, land the plane.
Let's wrap it up, put a bow on it. Great.
17 minutes.